Better today with the sun shining. Is the mood brighter?
The mood is definitely quieter, but what they want still is actually the fall of the regime and a complete change of the country's system. Actually, some members of the National Council told me that the government in Tripoli has reached out to them. They didn't tell me exactly who, and they said it was too late for dialogue at this stage, that there was nothing that would prove to them that they could actually trust anything that comes out of Tripoli. They do say that they thought that Saif al-Islam, the son of Gaddafi, was actually a reformist, but his rhetoric really and his attitude as they see it since the beginning of this uprising has shown them that that was actually a facade. So now no dialogue, the fall of the regime, and nothing less than that will do. You do tell them what the situation is a bit unstable, the future is unknown, and they say, well, we're still willing to pay a very heavy price for our freedom if that is needed. They say that they do expect that maybe the government will try to carry out a counter-offensive. They say that the armies the army that has switched sides is making its own preparations, trying to get ready for that eventuality, and they're bracing themselves for anything, but they won't stop until they get what they want.
And I suppose one of the major concerns is if the current government decides to attack its own facilities and exact revenge on Libya's future wealth, it'll go for the oil installations, which are largely in the east of the country. How well protected are they, do you think?
Well, the oil installations here, especially in the east, are in the hands of the opposition. Now, they have been working at a minimal capacity. The opposition has vowed that it's making its best to increase the output as quickly as possible and to respect all international contracts it has if those contracts were indeed legal. They're saying they're looking through all that file. If they see that there are any contracts that have been not really going through the legal ways, then they will cancel those contracts. And today the port of Tobruk, which is one of the main gateways for the oil here, has reopened. It's still not as busy as it was, but it certainly shows the will of the opposition really not to alienate the international community, to respect any kind of dealings Libya had so far, and to show that it's really about Libyans trying to take their own fate into their own matters.
Hoda, thank you very much indeed. We're talking about the strategic importance of certain places within Libya. One of them would be the hometown of Muammar Gaddafi. That's a place called Sirte. Now, our correspondent Tony Birtley is in Brega, which is 250 kilometers from Sirte. This is what he told us about the people there trying to get back to some semblance of normality.
A series of committees have set up now to look at defence, to look at food, to look at all kinds of aspects of daily life now. The schools are not open. Here it's a bit of a dead zone, and at AlJazeera also there's a problem because all the shops are still closed and people are suffering there. You know, considering the vast amount of oil wealth that Libya made, it's very surprising just how poor people are in this area. That wealth did not filter down to the people on the streets, so they're now suffering a great deal. But they have military committees, they have committees, they're trying the best they can to get some organisation. I think there was some kind of concern that the old faces, if you like, of the old guard from Gaddafi are taking over the new positions for the new Libya, and that's not going down well in some quarters. But of course these are interim measures, so it will change in time. But at the moment they're getting on with life the best they can.
There were massive problems, probably still are massive problems, with a number of people who've been trying to get out of Libya. Around about this time yesterday, there was an estimate that 100,000 people had gone out through the east of the country, I beg your pardon, the west of the country. That's the border with Tunisia, and 10,000, in fact, in one day alone. And they're finding it very, very difficult to cope there. There were protests on Sunday against the conditions for those who are forced to stay. They really have nowhere else to go. Or perhaps they do. Let's talk to James Bays. He's in a place called Jargis, not very far from that border post, James, and the ship behind you could play an important role for those people who need to get out, correct?
That's right, David. I'm 70 kilometres away from the border here in Jargis, in the port of Jargis, and as you say, behind me, this Egyptian naval vessel. Let's get a look at it This is the Shalatain, which is an Egyptian frigate, and it will shortly be setting sail. We're waiting for buses to come here with Egyptian workers who will be making their way to this ship. We believe they're going to put about 1,000 of them on this boat for a journey that will last about 5 days to the port of Alexandria. That suggests to me it'll be quite an uncomfortable crossing for them, that many people crammed onto the boat, because they've already had what has been a very frightening journey out of Libya, and then many of them have been waiting in the border area. There are 3 different places where people are waiting, actually at the border, and then at a camp, a transit camp, where people are camped out, living rough, some 5 kilometers away from the border, and then others who've actually come earlier, a few days ago, to here in Jarjis. They're going to be taking about 1,000 out, but there are many more people still at the border, David. When I was there a short time ago, Egyptians were there chanting, going, "Where is our military? We want them to come and get them out." Well, their military's arrived, but with a ship that will only take about 1,000 people.
I guess it's not just Egyptians, James, is it?
Well, the majority are Egyptians. It's clear there are more Egyptians than anyone else. But there are Chinese, there are Bangladeshis, there are people from all of the nations that were working inside Libya. And we're really very hard for us to get numbers because certainly the numbers in the border area are swelling. We know that there are more and more arriving from Libya. The Libyan workers at the border control people, and the people on the Tunisian side were keeping some sort of record. Well, they say, the Tunisians, that they're overwhelmed now and they're not keeping any record of the number that are coming through. There is a flow, there are people leaving, this ship will soon be leaving, there are people leaving from airports, but it still seems at the moment, David, that there are more people coming in from Libya than are leaving from the border area on these ships.
And is that it, James? Just the one vessel? I'm sorry, you may have told me this already, but how many more are planning to come in?
We don't know exactly how many, but certainly this is the first of a number of Egyptian ships. And at the same time, from the airport in Jerba, which is not far from here, there are flights which are taking people out. Most of those flights going to Egypt, as I said, the majority of people who are in the border area are Egyptian. Difficult conditions for them, but the Tunisians are doing what they can. There's food there, there's water there. It's not yet an emergency, but people are worried about the situation.
Thank you. James Bayes there, about 70 kilometres inside Tunisia, away from the border with Libya, and reminding us that there are so many people still trying to get out, and Tunisia is finding it very difficult to actually look after them. And it was the matter of human rights, dignity, all of those sort of things to do with forced evacuation and the violence that's been used against people inside Libya that's occupying the minds of those who are at a UN Human Rights Council meeting in Geneva. So many of the great and good have got up and said what they think about what's happening in Libya. We're expecting Hillary Clinton pretty soon to give her piece. But let's now hear from Catherine Ashton, who's the head of European Union Foreign Policy.
We have to offer our full support to do what the people of the region ask us to do. From a position of humility, knowing that our own histories are full of dark pages and our own path to deep democracy wasn't linear and wasn't easy. But with the conviction that in the ongoing transitions, full respect of human rights and fundamental freedoms is key. It's the only way to get sustainable security, to get justice, and to get prosperity.
And our man Nick Spicer is there at that meeting, the Human Rights Council meeting in Geneva. Not inside, Nick, but outside, and waiting to hear from Hillary Clinton, plus others. Is there a general theme running through the statements being made?
There's a lot of satisfaction here, almost self-satisfaction amongst the people who are speaking about the decision this council made on Friday in a special session which called for the suspension of Libya as a member and for an international investigation to look into possible war crimes. It's something that the Human Rights Council simply has never done in the past. It's often derided as a toothless place where countries who abuse human rights basically defend each other from any kind of criticism, and the consensus is they redeemed themselves. However, today is a different day. The Security Council over the weekend decided to impose an embargo embargo on Libya. And Catherine Ashton, from whom we just heard, said that the Council of Ministers in Brussels, which is the big decision-making body, has made it official policy. So all 27 members of the European Union will be applying that embargo on Libya, ban on weapons sales, freezing of assets of people linked to Muammar Gaddafi. But if there's a feeling of self-satisfaction, there's a lot of concern about the humanitarian situation, David, a realization that those refugee flows into Tunisia and Egypt are not stopping, and that when you have backed into a corner a regime such as Muammar Gaddafi's, they will just create more problems such as refugee flows, more chaos, in order to make life more difficult for the people who are trying to help from the outside.
Nick, as if to underline your point that it had been painted in many circles as an opportunity for countries simply to defend their own poor record on human rights. There we see somebody from a country, Sudan, which has been accused on many occasions of having an appalling record of human rights. The Minister of Justice there, Mohamed Bushan. I'm wondering whether all of those people who've popped up, Hillary Clinton, William Hague, Catherine Ashton, would they have been there talking about human rights were it not for the focus of the world on what's happening in the Middle East and North Africa?
No, I think people have come here because they really feel the winds of history are blowing, and that they've got to, particularly the Western countries, have to get a grip on events, have to get involved in a way that is seen as not interference, but as assisting the people who are on the side of freedom, to use some of the rhetoric that is used in the United States and I think is shared by much of the world. So people such as Clinton, such as Lavrov from Russia, such as William Hague have come here simply to not be overwhelmed by events, which William Hague, the Foreign Secretary of the UK, was comparing to the fall of the Berlin Wall and the countries of Central and Eastern Europe reaching for freedom at the end of the 1990s.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Nick Spicer keeping an eye on what's happening in Geneva for us, and our cameras will be there when Hillary Clinton talks. We'll bring that to you. She is expected within the next half an hour or so. Many countries requiring the attention of the UN Human Rights Council at that meeting. One of them, Yemen. There's been a lot of protests there, and the opposition in that country now says it won't be joining a unity government, which the president was expected to announce within the next couple of hours. An opposition coalition of political groups and anti-government protesters want the president out. Tens of thousands of people, in fact, some estimates say hundreds of thousands of people have been protesting about his leadership. Hashem Akhabara joins us from Sana'a. You said about 45 minutes ago, Hashem, that you thought this could be a tipping point. So I want to get a picture from you of how the intensity of the protests has increased and the numbers of people on the streets has increased. Are you noticing more and more people?
Well, I'm noticing dramatic change here in Yemen. It started about 17 days ago when the opposition said that they would not take to the streets because they were pleased with some of the concessions made by President Ali Abdullah Saleh. However, thousands of students, anti-government protesters and activists said that it's too late to talk about concessions. We are inspired by Tunisia and Egypt, and we'd like to emulate the same sense of momentum that has been there to topple the government. So after days, we're seeing this momentum building up, these people gathering more pace, and also inspiring thousands of young Yemenis across the country to join them. This is why the opposition is saying today that it's too late to talk about a consensus or a political way out of the crisis in Yemen, that Ali Abdullah Saleh should take into the account that the wind of change in the Arab world is about change of the regimes and change of governments rather than a reform from within. And this is exactly why people in Yemen are concerned about, particularly about tonight. They are concerned if the opposition and the government fail to strike a deal. Thousands of opposition activists and anti-government protesters will converge on the main streets here in the capital, in Taiz, which has become the focal point of the pro-democracy movement, and also in the city of Aden. And if security forces intervene, that could be it. That could be the very beginning of intense and very tense situation in Yemen.
Hashem, you couldn't hear my question last time we spoke at the end, but it was basically if the president has to go, are those who want to take his place, do they have a plan for the secessionist movement in the south and the Houthi rebels, which have caused so many problems for the incumbents at the moment, the current administration?
Well,
David, I've been asking the same question to senior government officials here and members of the ruling party, and they were telling me if President Ali Abdullah Saleh goes now without a setup, without a framework, Yemen would slip into more anarchy. It could be the worst scenario that people would imagine